Bobby.
Get out of here.
That's going to be me for the next 18 months.
It is?
Yeah. I am his unofficial campaign spokesman in Europe.
Yeah. You love Bobby, do you?
Yeah. So do the people.
They do?
Me and the people together.
You and the people.
Yeah, no. There's polls now pulling at 20% according to a Fox poll
Yeah.
among would-be Democrat voters.
What about global warming, though?
Yeah. Luckily, he toned that way down. I don't know if he did that because he doesn't believe it in the same way he used to, or he says something that kind of makes a coherent sense. It still gives away that he thinks man is, responsible for regulating weather / climate, but he's making it clear that the way the problem, as he believes the problem exists, is being solved, is being done in the same way he complains that health issues are being, quote, solved by Big Pharma. So it's corrupt. What's going on is corrupt and is in no way ameliorating the things he did see up close and personal, which are statistically true: environmental crisis, massive pollution by big firms, small firms, or anyone. He's litigated for 40 years. He knows all about actual environmental harm. So I know. I'd like to see it. Maybe someone should challenge him. We'll get the full banana out of him where he stands on this now. Given that we're in the age of Greta and extreme rhetoric, basically suggesting to people from official source, from government spokespeople, that they need to basically become poor to save the planet. Where does he stand on that spectrum? Because at the same time, in his speeches, like we've seen in the last couple of weeks, or his interviews on TV, he's saying, I'm standing up for America's poor. They've gotten poorer through the whole COVID business, among other things. Inflation's killing them. So vote for me. I'm with you. Explain to us, Bobby, are you with them, the poor, vis-a-vis climate change? Because if you are, they're going to die in droves. So square that circle for us.
And what about Russia and Ukraine?
Oh, I thought he did that really good. Yeah, definitely.
The
whole story about his son going, that was cute. Because the way he explained that was, we Americans have, well, this is the mirage, right? The myth, the national mythos. So he tapped into that first and says, we believe in standing up for the little guy, like the Avengers out there, or Batman, seeking to punish those who sow injustice anywhere in the world, right? So we jump into Ukraine. We're like, this is terrible. Hang on, what are you doing, big guy Russia to little guy Ukraine? We're going to sort you out, Then he's explained that's the impulse that sent his son there. Now his son's home. He hadn't explained why exactly, but he segued from that story, which squarely puts him on the side of pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, right? To, has anyone asked, why are we in Ukraine? Because I remember at the beginning of this that we were told we were there because Russia's illegally invaded. Well, since then, the Secretary of Defense, Austin, and Biden have said that actually our purpose has changed. Our purpose now is to bleed the Russian economy and the Russian military. And then Biden said, of course, on more than one occasion now, our purpose is to deplatform, i.e. regime change Putin in the Kremlin. So he said, no, that's not what you told us at the start. We need to talk about this because what's happening to Ukraine in real terms is that you've wiped out an entire generation of Ukrainians. They've either left because they're refugees elsewhere or they're dead because they were forced to fight. So you see what I mean? It's a qualifying statement. But at the outset, they're not going to be able to hit him with, you're a Russian agent. Yeah. You see?
Yeah. Well, they will anyway, probably, if he gets very far. But he obviously is aware of that. I think he's aware of that. And he's from a political family and he's no slouch. And he realizes that in order to have any chance of actually getting the Democratic nomination, he's going to have to tone down. He can't be too extreme, basically, right? If you're too extreme, forget about it.
It's still pretty. You want to see a section of his manifesto?
How long?
It's not him saying it. We can just read it out.
Okay.
Just a clip. a snip from his website. As depends on what you mean by extreme.
Yeah, well, extreme from the point of view of Washington D.C. Like,
Oh, this is extreme. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is totally like yeah. I sent it to Scotty there. It's basically from the website, yeah, campaign website. So this would be his official stance on foreign policy for the United States. Maybe if you click on the left one first, I won't read the whole thing, but yeah, again, it frames it in,
Right.
our empathy for the Ukrainian people suffering.
well,
of
that
course, of
already
course.
puts him at odds with Washington establishment who want to keep the Washington establishment want to keep the war going, right? And he says we got to put an end to the suffering of the Ukrainian people. So,
We have to stop seeing the world in terms of enemies and adversaries. Blah, blah, blah. John Quincy Adams, he's quoted him a few times. We will put an end to this war. Okay, that's, I mean, they've all done that. Obama said, I'm going to end the Iraq war. He did kind of by a second term, but so he wants to end the Ukraine war. But to go to the next one. As president, I will start the process of unwinding empire. We will bring the troops home. And
That's
elsewhere in
heresy.
the speech, he's talking about all 800 bases, including the lily pads and the secret stocks and stashes and underground air bases and the whole lot. The whole lot.
we
It's all
will
coming
end
home.
the proxy wars, bombing campaigns, covert operations, coups, paramilitaries, and everything else that has become so normal. Most people don't know what's happening. So that's more or less like splintering the CIA into 1,000 pieces, right? Because that's pretty much proxy wars, bombing campaigns, covert operations, coups, and paramilitaries. That's CIA tradecraft right there. So you end that, you end the CIA, you end its raison d'etre.
Yeah. The CIA / what has become a parallel U.S. government. It's a whole superstructure.
Yeah.
So that's basically MAGA, just kinder.
Yeah, Democratic MAGA.
Yeah, I said it a few times now. Maybe he's going with it. Make the U.S. an enviable democracy again, or something like that. I know it's a pipe dream, but still, he's articulating.
MADA. Make America democratic again.
Yeah.
MADA. Instead of mad.
He's cited Adams several times because he was saying at the outset, 250 years ago, you can't be an empire abroad, and he didn't use the term democracy at the time, but you can't be a functioning constitutional republic at home and an empire abroad. That's just, and that's been borne out by history. That's true. Also this week in U.S. politics, Biden has formally announced his for re-election. Well, Biden's handlers told him to read it out. Anyway, he wants to do it. He would be 86 if he won a second term.
By the end of it.
Yeah. That dotard. It's funny, the North Koreans called Trump a dotard, but that didn't really apply. In that circumstance, Biden really is faltering most of the time. They will be mad to have him run again, I think.
Who, Trump?
Biden.
Oh, Biden, yeah. Well, somebody. Somebody has to.
Somebody for the establishment. There must be other candidates. Surely Kamala. She's kind of philosophical. No.
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 Yeah, I don't know who they're going to pick. I mean, I think Biden will go for it. Like, they don't care at this point, as long as he can keep himself, this side of the grave type thing, and still, as long as he can continue to,
He just
mostly, express himself relatively coherently, then why not? Like, that's all. I mean, that's all he's done. That was the requirement for his first term. He was already in bad enough shape then. So if he doesn't degrade very much between now and then, now and next year, like, why not shove him in there? I still think, like I was saying, I've said it a few times, and I said it to you, and you had some quibbles about it, whatever. You didn't think it was going to happen, but I think there's going to be a hung election. I think it's going to be a balls up basically, and
mainly because there's no system. It hasn't happened before in the US.
Yeah,
It has in British Parliament, but
yeah. Well, in other countries, yeah, but that's because other countries
don't even call it
allow
that.
for elections. It's parliamentary elections, whatever. This is not. We're talking about a presidential election here. There's no such thing as in the same way there is in the US. There's no such thing as a presidential election in European countries, whatever, where that's the new government type thing, or the controlling party. So all the countries have parliamentary elections, and that's the most important thing. And you can have kind of split. You can have governments, coalition governments, many different parties. You can't have two presidents. You can't have a joint presidency where it's shared between a Democrat and a Republican. So it's either it's one or nothing. One or other. It's there's no sharing of it. But I think that could happen. Obviously, it clearly can happen. It just doesn't happen for some reason. But I think conditions are, at this point anyway, are right for it to happen. Where basically DeSantis runs as well as Trump. Either one of them as an independent. One of them gets the Republican nomination. The other doesn't, and says, "Screw you, I'm going to run anyway."
That's the part, yeah.
But
that's
that would
the
happen.
big if.
Yeah, I think
that hasn't happened before.
Yeah. Well,
once it's been whittled down to one of GOP or GNC after June, before November, no one has then.
No member that ran for the nomination then I don't know.
So that's a big if.
Yeah.
That's my quibble with it. My second quibble would be you're assuming that all three candidates get how do you say, the counts go accurately for three people, whereas it isn't tipped or nudged at the death.
Make it more complicated though to rig it three ways type thing instead of rigging it just two ways, one way.
Well, if you have one favourite, you're only focused on.
But you got to steal votes from two other people, two other major people. I mean, in other elections, you see, there's always independents running stuff, and they get 1-2% of the vote maximum, whatever. It's just a matter of upping that. Independents running in this election, but getting much more. There being a split in the establishment parties, particularly the Republican Party. But it's not beyond. It's not beyond. I don't think it would be a split in the Democratic Party. If Biden were to run, all Democrats would vote for Biden, basically. I don't think it would be a split that side, but there could be a split the other side, which means you'd have three contenders, basically.
Which means that
electoral college votes have to be split three ways, and are split three ways, and nobody gets 270.
We'll see after June. The big if is for that to happen. There's such an uproar over whatever they decide at either DNC or the RNC. RNC. Yeah, there'll have to be uproar. And it would have to go differently than it did in 2016 now, when the DNC, despite being so open, there were court cases and everything, and it was acknowledged in one of them that Debbie Wasserman Schultz had thrown it for Hillary against Bernie, and it required his compliance. But this time it will require someone to do not a Bernie. Yeah. And to say, no, not this time.
Well, I think the most likely scenario would be where Ron DeSantis gets the nomination.
The formal,
yeah, and he becomes the Democratic or the Republican nominee for president, and then you've got more than enough Trump supporters who would be outraged at that and would push. And all Trump would have to do would be decide to run as independent, which he technically is. He's outside politics, so he'd be natural for him to run as independent, and then he would get a significant amount of votes, and then that's the way you split it. You'd have the Trump loyal voters who would vote for him as an independent, but then you'd have Republican Party loyalists who would feel obliged to vote for the Republican nominee, which would be DeSantis.
Because that's how
you immediately split the Republican vote, and that's a big part of the country. And they get, 50%. You get 25 or more, because probably you might get actually more. There's probably more Republican voters. But again, it's like you said, if you throw rigging into it, whatever, all bets are off. But I still think it's a possibility. I think it'd be awesome. It'd be the best possible outcome for America next November. It would.
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah.
You're not in it.
I'd just be, America's too big. Loads of people in America can feel they're not in it as well. Most people in America feel that they're not in American party politics because they live so far away from Washington, D.C. in the center of all that bullshit. You know what I mean? I mean, people out in the boondocks in the south or in the northwest or in the northeast or whatever, or somewhere lost in the what do you call it, the Rust Belt.
The Rust Belt or the Appalachians.
Yeah, I mean,
the Deep South. The tragedy of it is that when
country.
the tragedy comes full circle, looking back these last 15 years of the regime, it will be that that large grouping of previously apathetic and lost to the system people will have been pulled back into it by Trump. And so you know what I mean? They'll be in the game and most upset.
Right.
When
the vote for him,
they'd be better off if not.
Yeah, exactly. But the vote for him was evidence of the feelings among a vast number of Republican voters that they had been disenfranchised, that they were no longer represented by anything that went on in Washington, D.C. in the presidential elections. Well, a lot of people, but Republicans were the most vocal about it in terms of,
One of the things Kennedy has been saying is...
there's Democrats out there who feel the same way, yeah.
Trump won in 2016 because he said Kennedy Democrats voted for him.
Okay, yeah.
Damn straight. This brings us full circle back to 1963. Trump's the populist establishment. CIA hates him, wants him out, succeeds kind of in controlling him. 1963. Those Kennedy Democrats now have an interesting dilemma.
Yeah.
Here, do you go with Bobby's son or Trump? Because both will articulate broadly the populist.
They'd take Bobby's son, like, obviously. You know what I mean? It's finally, somebody they can actually get behind, without having to hold their nose type thing,
Do you want to see his first campaign ad?
Whose? Go on.
It's not.
Since you love him so much.
Wait till you see the intro.
What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
Every nation has a darker side, and the easiest thing for a politician to do is to appeal to our hatred and our anger and our bigotry and greed and xenophobia and all of the alchemies of demagoguery. My father and my uncle had a vision for America, a vision of racial harmony, of prosperity for all Americans, of peace in the world, and of honest government. Their lives were tragically cut short, and America took a different path. Yet the possibility they foresaw is still alive, the America that almost was, and yet may be. I've been fighting corporate corruption my entire life, but I understand that today the problem is much larger than a few crooked individuals. The problem is a system that no longer serves the people, and a people who are so divided and so fearful that they are easily ruled. It's time to unlearn the reflexes of fear and blame and find ways to unify ourselves and turn our country around. I won't pretend to you that it will be easy, but I know what it will take. My father said it: love, wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and that's where we need to start. We will scale down the war machine and bring our resources home. We will rebuild our water systems, repair our roads, modernize our railroads, and clean up our environment. We will also clean up government and earn back the people's trust.
In the swamp.
We will end the secrecy, the censorship, and the surveillance. We will again be a fearless land of liberty.
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it.
We will face honestly the darker parts of our history, the genocide, the racism, not to shame or blame or punish, but to repair as best we can in a spirit of compassion and kindness toward all. I'm inviting all of you to join me to create an America that we can believe in and be proud of again. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm running for President of the United States.
Awesome. Do it. Let's see.
Yeah, it's drained the swamp, but
Yeah.
nicer.
Yeah. Annias, I asked previously about in the chat there about what did he write? You can't scroll up, can you? He asked about wouldn't, in the event of a hung presidential election in the US, if the electoral college would then decide how that would be resolved. Well, it's not. It's resolved by Congress. As soon as if nobody gets 270 electoral college votes, which is half So it's basically seen as
It's
it's set up like if you don't get half, somebody's always going to get half. Basically, you have to get 270, which is half of the 540. If you don't, if that doesn't happen, if it's a three-way split in some way, which, like you said, hasn't happened, then Congress has to decide. Congress just does a simple majority, 50-50, but then you have a very divided Congress, and the same thing could happen in Congress. I've got it all laid out, Neil. It's going to happen, right? The band's going to make it. Anyway, yeah, speaking of presidential candidates, what about last night? There was the press corps dinner that Biden was at, you know, the yearly thing where they tell jokes and
The
make
annual
fun of each
White
other.
House
Annual White House
correspondence.
correspondence dinner. Obviously, if you not much to it's just it was pretty pathetic. But anyway, there's a part in it here you'll see where Joe just play it there actually. Somebody, one of the speakers, makes a bit of a joke, a poignant, pertinent joke.
I'm happy to be here. Oh, real quick, Mr. President, I think you left some of your classified documents up here. You can get to yeah, no, don't give them to him. I'll put them in a safe place. He don't know where to keep them. Happy to be here, though. Happy to be here.
Classified leaving classified documents, like not, taking them from the White House and putting them in the wrong place or giving them to somebody else. It's funny. It's a joke, right? Except when Trump, right? Trump did it. Super serious. This is impeach. Can we impeach him? No, he's not president anymore. Send him to jail, right?
Yeah.
But at the White House correspondence dinner, it's a big joke, and you can make fun of it, right? So, yeah, it's an example of how superficial the whole thing is, right? I mean, as if that needs to be said, but they get away with it. Trump can be, accused of anything and everything without any basis, and it's across the media, and it's Trump.
But Biden's son can be.
But Biden's son can be
have actual evidence of massive corruption,
which we talked about last week.
And the DOJ is like,
where you have Blinken. Did we talk about this last week? We did, didn't we? Blinken, the current Secretary of State, was
in the run up to 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He basically got it was in the media.
Yeah.
But didn't get much coverage. But
He
Blinken
got the CIA to rally all
around
the others.
51, as
Heads
it
up.
turned out, 51 symbolic number. To rally around and saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story that was published in the New York Post about that, basically the laptop story being that Hunter Biden's laptop had been left at a laptop repair shop, and certain people had got access to it, and there was information on there showing that his son had been running a kind of a crooked, corrupt criminal scam, and not a scam, but kind of cash for access to my father, the vice president, in Ukraine, with Ukrainians, with Chinese, and all that kind of stuff that Trump talked about at the time and wanted the Bidens investigated for it, and he got impeached for that.
Mm-hmm.
Or they tried to impeach him for asking the Ukrainians to look into this evidence that now has become has been revealed as factual by a former CIA director who said, yes, Anthony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, called me and said, listen, can you do something about this Hunter Biden laptop story that's coming out in August 2020 that has been published by the New York Post, which is going to look bad for Biden's re-election. It's going to, not be good for his re-election. So can you get the intel community to rally around and produce a document saying this is Russian disinformation? Well, it's like, what do you mean? They didn't say it was that the Russians had somehow put that information on the laptop. They just said, yeah, there's no evidence that this isn't actually Hunter Biden's laptop and that the documents on it aren't actually factual, but we still think it's Russian disinformation. The fact that anybody's talking about it is Russian disinformation. I mean, it's true. So any evidence, any hard factual evidence of American government corruption, American establishment corruption, that gets talked about in the media or in social media, it's the Russians forcing the people to talk about it. Because ordinarily, American people on social media would not talk about the corruption in politics unless the Russians encouraged them to do so. And that's the problem, right?
Right.
That's why the allegations are not valid, because we say isn't it?
It's full of hypocrisy.
But it's so bad. That is
I know,
so bad.
Clear cut. We're living in like the last days of not the Biden administration, of the regime, of this kind of, Trump and others have said the weaponization of the justice system against your political opponents. And of course, someone who's been all over that since 2016, and especially since second half of Trump administration, Tucker Carlson. He's now gone. I think after a week of considering it, it's quite cut and dried for me that he was fired because we're going into an election year. These people are interested in the short term.
He's gotten rid of it somewhere.
Yeah, it's short term. I think for all that, I did initially think, damn, I bet that's because they don't want a voice for a platform for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to get to, because Tucker Carlson was giving one. Since then, however, Bobby Jr. has been on CNN and ABC, even though they tried to, stifle him and insinuate all kinds of evil shit about him. So that my theory there about him getting zero platform other than what he could have gotten on Tucker Carlson, not quite true. But I think in general, they just don't want this loudmouth, popular, extremely articulate guy in the run-up to... Because the more... Every election is crucial, but the more we get into this state where rank corruption is just not talked about and phony charges are inflated against Trump and others.
Anybody?
It's getting more and more like desperate to hold on to that power. You will do increasingly flagrant things, Maybe I'm too early. Maybe there'll be something that will come out that will either confirm or probably not. It's probably going to be hush-hush as to the exact reason why Carlson was fired.
Right.
Maybe hopefully he himself will articulate something.
Yeah. Well, like last Sunday, we were talking about him. We were talking about that exact point that Tucker Carlson given. We were talking about RFK Jr. and he had been on Tucker Carlson's show and announcing his candidacy and stuff. And we were saying that's it's going to be it's a problem for the establishment.
I said it's
basically.
going to be an interesting 18 months because this will help push his message.
Right,
and 12 hours later, he's gone.
Tucker's gone. And then a few days go by and he says nothing. And then Wednesday, I think it was, he just put on his Twitter account, I think it's the only thing he's actually said publicly since he was, quote unquote, fired from Fox News. And so far, it was put up on Wednesday, I think the 27th, or is that Thursday? Thursday. And it's got, since then, it has had, at least on Twitter, it's had almost 80 million views.
Nuts.
80, I mean, okay, you can allow for some repeat
level.
viewing, but that's like 80 million people. So that's about like 40%, 35-40% of the adult, well, of course not American, but I was going to say it's 40% of the American adult population, but it wasn't just Americans watching it. But it's only a couple of minutes. Do we want to play it?
Yeah.
Because it dovetails pretty well with what Kennedy was saying.
Good evening, it's Tucker Carlson. One of the first things you realize when you step outside the noise for a few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people, people who really care about what's true, and a bunch of hilarious people also, a lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening. The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated. And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope. See you soon.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't write him off just yet. But,
Well, it depends where he's going to go, but we'll see.
yeah.
Or how,
It's one thing to have an online presence, but to have a corporation backing it, it helps.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, on social media, certainly has access to a lot of people. You know what I mean? It's still only a relatively small percentage of the population that actually have an account on Twitter, and it's not just Twitter. Obviously, that would have been copied to other platforms and stuff. It's hard to quantify the actual number of people who saw it. And of course, that's part of the problem is that I'd say that at this point, the majority, at least the majority, if not the large majority of Americans are not interested in anything he just said, are not aware. I mean, they're vaguely aware of it being a problem, but they're not interested. They don't take part in that broad scale meta kind of narrative or conversation. Very few do. You know, they're focused on their own particular lives and maybe specific local issues or their own particular issues, whatever. But they're not interested. They don't have the. I don't know if you need to be good at abstract thinking in a certain sense to see the bigger picture, or to look at it from a broader perspective rather than your own particular issues. You know, because your own issues are part of a bigger dynamic anyway. You know,
most Americans then at this point still think most things are fine.
I think most of them, they just keep their head down and carry on, like most people in the rest of the world. In fact, just anywhere in the world, just keep their heads down. Like they pay passing attention to if something passes on the screen or whatever, like that's brought to their attention. But other than that, but the problem is that they feel that things are bad. There's a problem. There's not a lot of thinking going on and too much feeling going on. But they're getting a sense that things aren't right. But they focus too locally on particular issues that are causing problems for them in their local, in their personal lives or in the local community, whatever. They don't realize that's part of a bigger problem. And you need to look at the bigger problem that is that your local problems are filtering down from that larger problem. But then that becomes too much for a lot of people. When we fix the system, I'm trying to fix my local little problems here, the issues within my family or my extended community. Like you want me to drain the swamp or something, you know what I mean? That's what we need Trump for, right? So obviously, but again, talk about draining the swamp. A lot of people are aware that something needs to be done at a higher level. Top-down changes are important, because you can try and fix your issues at local levels and stuff, but if the infection keeps spreading down, you're going to be chasing your tail all the time. Did I talk last week about that there was one story in the mainstream media? It was a couple of weeks ago, and it was from uncensored documents from a Guantanamo Bay military commission recently. Did I talk about that?
Don't think so. No.
Basically about 9/11 pilots being, or 9/11 hijackers being, CIA agents. I did mention it, didn't I?
We did mention it last week.
I think I must have put it up. This is the article.
I didn't know it was from Guantanamo.
Yeah, there were uncensored documents from the Guantanamo Military Commission, which is handling the cases of defendants accused of carrying out the 9/11 attacks. Basically, what it reveals is it's something that's been around for a while, going back several years.
But now, for the first time, they're unredacted.
Yes, and it gives more details, but it still focuses on the idea that there was some kind of CIA/Saudi intelligence involvement with the 9/11 hijackers.
Yeah, because they were handling them or blocking FBI investigations of these two.
Yeah. So the FBI was trying to, there's other details about how the FBI was investigating after 9/11, looking into these individuals, and found out that they was running into a kind of brick wall when they came up against evidence about the Saudis and the CIA running these guys, basically. So it seems that what just for people who don't know, here's 9/11 in like 20 seconds, right? What happened on 9/11 in 20 seconds? It looks like obviously the CIA was involved with these hijackers, also Saudi intelligence, but that basically what was going on with those quote-unquote hijackers is something that went on beforehand and went on afterwards, and no one pays any attention because it's par for the course intel agency relationships with other outside intel agencies running different operations and different schemes, basically. That's what was going on. These guys were basically, one possibility is that they were anti-Saudi individuals who were in America, had come to America, and maybe were brought there by the CIA, but that they were maybe, you know, reactionaries or revolutionaries in a certain sense and wanted to get rid of the Saudi regime. The Saudis had identified them in that capacity, and they were following them. They were involved with them, spying on them, etc., keeping tabs on them in the US because they saw them as a potential threat to the Saudi Arabians, the Saudi government, the Saudi regime, I should say. The other idea is that they were simply Saudi. They weren't all Saudi Arabian necessarily anyway, right? They're different backgrounds, but they came through Saudi Arabia to America in cooperation with the CIA to be trained in America by the CIA, to be put back in the Middle East to be the CIA's eyes and ears on the ground or infiltrate into certain groups in the Middle East to do things that the CIA couldn't do directly. So it's the kind of thing that happens all the time, is very normal procedure for intel agencies, running agents, running people. That's why they were being taken over. They were given, in the US and Florida, they were training on little Cessnas and stuff. They're going through the basic training, let's say, to be a CIA asset in the Middle East. Except someone used them for something else. Not that someone made them hijack those planes, because obviously, in our opinion, the evidence suggests that those planes were remotely hijacked and flown into the towers by someone else.
Yeah,
but these guys were basically patsies.
Yeah, they couldn't fly planes.
Yes, they were patsies, and they were used. So they took individuals who are part of a normal intelligence, CIA intelligence agency operation, fairly benign, and turned into 9/11 hijackers. Basically, patsies.
On that day when they boarded those planes, they
Right.
were doing what they'd done a dozen times.
Right, they were going from one place to another.
Months leading
Right.
up to that, maybe they were going to
pick
up something,
right.
trail somebody, visit some more hookers, which they had been doing actually as so-called Islamic jihadists.
Yeah.
They were going to strip bars in Vegas routinely.
Yeah.
They just thought it was a normal business day. They didn't get on those
Right.
planes, and remember the infamous CCTV still of them. That's them. Terminal at Logan Airport.
Yeah. They'd done that.
They were there that morning, fine, but doesn't mean that they knew what was about to happen.
They were victims, basically, which is interesting. The perps
For me,
were the victims.
Well, yeah.
Anyway.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
For me, the interesting thing that, well, obviously, it's very interesting in terms of 9/11, but also in general, there's something called the Safari Club. Goes back to like the 70s, I think. It's an explicit workaround. There were parts of the world the CIA could not access. They couldn't have agents run because they couldn't get into those countries. So
Too dangerous.
other countries like Saudi Arabia or elements within it agreed to create informally the Safari Club, where they would do CIA activities on their behalf and run operations locally in the Middle East, for example. And that's the kind of parallel networks of the quote-unquote deep state that are a part of the wallpaper. They're part of the very functions of how this world has been run for the last century.
Yeah. The Safari Club was one of the primary objectives of the Safari Club was to do, as you said, run Western intelligence assets in the Middle East region in order to keep Russia out.
Yeah.
To push back against Russian influence in the Middle East. So all very standard kind of stuff. And this was just one small part of a big operation that had been going on for decades and decades and continued afterwards. But these 19 guys, and in fact, there may not even been 19 of them.
No.
Because of course, what happens in that situation when you're running that kind of when you're taking people from the Middle East, let's say, to America to be trained, etc., and then they're given new names. Right, they're given false identities, all that kind of stuff, because depending on what they have to do. So that's why you had, and it's in the BBC actually, not long after 9/11 attacks, a few years maybe. It came out, and it's on a BBC article about how a bunch of the alleged 9/11 hijackers, the names of them, and even their photographs. So, you know, where they posted the photographs of all the 9/11 hijackers, the 19 of them and their names. Like, I think there was something like 7 or 8 of them all spoke up from different parts of the Middle East and Asia, like in India, Pakistan in particular, a few saying that I'm not a 9/11 hijacker. I'm not dead. I'm actually here. Can anybody, you know, just let, you know,
Shut up,
I'm
you're
not
dead.
So obviously those identities were stolen, given to someone, or just made up. You know, how many actual individuals? It gets very smoke and mirrors at this point. How many people of the how many 19 hijackers actually existed in bodily form in America? Probably a lot less. There weren't 19 of them.
Oh, yeah, who knows? Do you remember the Oklahoma bombing in 1996? There's a bunch of Saudis involved in that too. On the periphery, maybe running other trucks that went by the building that day, you know.
Those are people who are doing something that they
more
are involved
recently.
in something else and don't know that they're involved in what they ended up being involved in.
I think it was last
It's
year.
called a patsy.
Or 2 years ago, Saudi nationals, not spooks, actual military guys in training were at a U.S. airbase in Florida. And one of them shot up a bunch of people, killed 5 people. It was like, at first I thought this is going to be a major media event, freaking scandal, diplomatic. Oh my God, who was this guy? Initially they were saying he was like, you know, Al-Qaeda wannabe, Allahu Akbar. But then they just ate it. They just hushed the whole thing up. But who knows, like, did he just go off or something? But they covered it up.
Yeah.
Because he was under
National security.
Yeah, national security.
You know, during the week, I think was it since last week, or was it since our last show? Anyway, Elon Musk recently started putting a government affiliated website or government sponsored website because of the whole, you know, the way a lot of social media put that on Russian news outlets. They put Russian government supported. He started to put it on the BBC, on C-SPAN, and a bunch, you know,
Canadian CBC,
a bunch
NPR.
of bunch of others, right? And they weren't happy about it. And at least I think was it the NPR actually deleted their Twitter account as a result. They said, "How dare you!"
Few of them.
Except, and the problem is that they, you know, it's publicly known, and they themselves admitted that they get funding from the Canadian government. Anyway, but you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to, you know, tar us with that propaganda brush right there, you know, that smear. You're not allowed to smear us in that way by saying that we're not an independent media organization, despite the fact that we get money from the government. So, but then he changed it to publicly funded. At least for the BBC, he changed it. He had it on the BBC initially, and then he changed it to publicly funded for the BBC, because technically, you know, the BBC gets taxpayers' money, right? So it's given money. It's ordinary people's money. That's why the BBC is a free service for British citizens, because they're paying for it, right? So publicly not so bad, right? Except that money still flows through the government to the BBC, right?
It's criminal. Do you remember when COVID kicked off?
Who?
COVID kicked off. Pandemic emergency response measure in the UK. The UK government basically commandeered the entire media apparatus, newspapers, BBC, Sky, it didn't matter who, public, private, small, large, and said, your entire advertising space is ours, and we will pay for it.
Yeah.
All of it. So, like, it's like...
But everybody agreed that was a good thing to do.
Everybody became one entity.
Right. But that was a good thing to do, because it was saving lives, right? Hands, face, and space. Protect Granny, right? So, but anyway, I thought this was interesting as a kind of a spin on that particular question of whether or not the BBC, for example, is state-funded or is influenced by government policy, or in its reporting it's influenced by government policy. This is just from a couple of days ago. The BBC chairman, right, so the top dog in the BBC, Richard Sharp, resigned on Friday, 2 days ago, after an independent report found he breached rules by not disclosing a potential conflict of interest in his role in securing a $1 million loan for the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
De Fuhrer.
So the BBC isn't government controlled media, but it does have its chief executive has been exposed as having basically securing £1 million for the Prime Minister. Is that, I don't know, is there influence there? I don't know.
When they go to the same dinner parties on Friday night and swap wives, are they meeting of minds going on maybe? Are they all
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
maybe? It's
Anyway,
incestuous.
so that kind of-
It's a kind of distinction of Westernia that no longer matters. It's become a meaningless abstraction because we live in a pathocracy. Like before, separation of powers, legislative, executive, judiciary. What the fuck does that even mean anymore? Separation of church and state. What does that mean anymore? The rule of law, we're all equal under the law. All of this is meaningless now.
Yeah.
It's pure crony capitalism,
Yeah.
which means it's one. You can either call it
The fusion of the state and corporations. What's that?
fascism.
Well, call it what you want. But there's some, with these revelations, horrible revelations, or not horrible revelations, but revelations that, kind of validate what we've been saying for so long, and where we just go nod our heads and go, yeah, kind of been, predicted that a long time ago, said that was happening a long time ago, now it's coming out. But there's other stuff, it seems like at this point in history, there's an awful lot of stuff coming out, obviously about corruption and the true nature of government and pathocracy and how it operates and all that kind of stuff, and the world we really live in and who's ruling it and what they're doing. But, and that's all kind of shocking to a lot of people, and even to us it's kind of dismaying because, you see the fact that this information is being revealed and nobody does anything about it. Like we mentioned about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and the CIA directly aiding Biden by covering that up and admitting it, that they covered it up, pretended it was Russian disinformation, and in that way arguably secured the election for Biden. And there's crickets from the American population.
Right.
Nothing. They're all up in arms when they're told that Trump was trying to steal the election, or supposedly they're up in arms. But
A bunch of them
when actual evidence, so they're told through lies and made up narratives that Trump stole their election or Trump did this, and it's all lies, there's no foundation to it, and they get all worked up about it, or some people get worked up about it, a lot of people. But when actual hard evidence comes out that the other guy was actually interfered and effectively, in a certain sense, stole the 2020 election, there's not a word. So it's pretty dismaying for us. But there's other things that come out, for example, like the people speaking up, this one, in the Telegraph just yesterday, I think, meat is crucial for human health, scientists say. Close to 1,000 experts unite behind statements that rejects the zealotry of plant-based diets and promotes livestock farming.
Good. I like,
Yeah.
share, retweet.
In fact, removing fresh meat and dairy from diets would harm human health. Women, children, and the elderly and low income would be particularly negatively impacted. So governments are, Western governments in particular, are today trying to force people or encourage people or manipulate people to stop eating meat and go vegetarian, etc., etc. And if the evidence suggests that that would directly harm human health, and particularly women, children, and elderly would be particularly negatively impacted, and the government is pushing it, what conclusion can you draw? Either that they don't know the science, but they have a lot of scientists behind them when they're making these statements about how you should stop eating red meat, but yet there's a large body of scientific evidence backed by thousands of actual scientists who have come out, or 1,000 actual scientists who have come out recently and published a statement or paper saying that no, actually this government policy on what people should eat, suggesting that people are encouraging people to eat only vegetables, would actually damage people's health. What does the government do about that?
The government goes and says, but has this study been peer reviewed?
Right, yeah, by us. peer reviewed by the government, by a bunch of eggheads, bureaucratic eggheads. Yeah, and then in other, that wasn't exactly woke, but I thought this was super funny. It's again from the Telegraph. Egypt there's a Netflix show. It's actually produced by I think is it called Cleopatra?
Right.
It's a Cleopatra documentary, and it's produced by Will Smith's super woke, super
Jada.
in her masculine Jada Pinkett Smith, his wife. I suppose she's still his wife. As long as he keeps slapping people for telling jokes about her, he'll continue to be her husband. Anyway, so Egypt has officially, the Egyptian government has said that show casting Cleopatra as a black woman is a blatant historical fallacy. The nation's minister, the fourth paragraph there, the nation's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities has released a statement pointing out that Cleopatra was descended from a dynasty of Greek rulers of Egypt and would therefore have possessed light-skinned and Hellenic features.
Racist.
Shut up!
Racist. That's why we need to change history.
So it's crazy. Like, it's one thing, when people in the West complain about that, but it's when an Egyptian. I mean, you think the Egyptians would, because that's almost like you think the Egyptians would take that one as a win in a certain sense.
Yeah.
Because her being cast, she's black, so she's closer, obviously, to Egyptian people.
Especially
So,
the tourism
yeah,
ministry.
Yeah.
More tourism.
right, yeah. But no, they just wanted to point out the fact that Cleopatra was actually Greek. Yes. And talking about heads of state and royal type people, this is awesome as well. Charles, there's going to be a new king in England.
Oh, next week.
King
yeah.
of England. Next week, no less, yep.
God
Coronation
save
is
our regime.
our regime. It's Coronation. Coronation King Charles. Public invited to swear allegiance to King Charles.
Saw that, yeah.
He won't be wearing that bandana. He'll be wearing a nice crown. But if you just scroll down, let me see where it is. I see it. Okay. If you go down there, go down towards the bottom, basically, past the. Keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, just under there. So, the king will pray aloud using words. Is that the right place? Hang on, maybe I missed it.
I have it here
Do you?
on a shorter article.
Too much text. Okay, sorry. Just go up to the picture, the one of the Queen. Where's the Queenie? There, the video. Yeah. So, just above that, the Archbishop of Canterbury said it would recognise and celebrate tradition as well as continue elements that reflect the diversity of our contemporary society. The public will be given an active role in the ceremony for the first time, with people around the world set to be asked to cry out and swear allegiance to the king. And just below that, the order of service will read, all who so desire in the Abbey and elsewhere say together, I swear that I will pay true allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors according to law, so help me God. The Archbishop of Canterbury will then proclaim, God save the king, with all asked to respond, God save King Charles, long live King Charles, may the king live forever and ever, amen. The homage of the people is particularly exciting because that's brand new. There's something we can share in because of technological advances, so that not just the people in the Abbey, but people who are online, on television, who are listening and who are gathered in parks at big screens in churches. This sense of a great cry around the nation and around the world of support for the king. I'm reminded of, for some reason when I read that I was thinking Star Wars. Was it Return of the Jedi? No. First Star Wars, I think.
Don't look at me.
I sense Obi-Wan Kenobi, I sense a
Right,
disturbance
so-
in the Force, as if
right.
millions of voices cried out in terror and then were silenced. Maybe what'll happen if millions of people cry that out, that great cry around the nation? Do you think it'll be a good thing, Neil, or a bad thing? Or it'll just it won't matter. It won't matter, exactly.
It reminds me of clap at 6 p.m. every Thursday.
Sort of. Yeah.
They're kind of hoping to recreate the national cohesion that was brief there in 2020 in the UK.
Yeah. Horrible cohesion.
I swear that I will pay true allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors according to law, unless we decide to depose him and bring in someone else who's 52 places removed in the actual, descendancy, which they've done before, to the guy who should be King Charles, who would have been King Charles III, and this would have been King Charles IV, but he's King Charles III because of a switcheroo, infamous switcheroo, which brought in first Dutch and then Germans.
The Hanovers.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I've got, a little part of me is like, that's nice. That's traditional.
Yeah.
But the bigger part of me is like, I can't separate Charles from Klaus Schwab. And like, you want to pay allegiance to the regime. Yeah, if the regime actually, instantiates the will of the people,
Right.
perhaps.
Represents it, at
But
least.
if it doesn't,
Against Parliament. If it's just
then who's going to swear allegiance?
if it's just
to
a
that?
rubber stamp for Parliament from the pathocrats in Parliament, then not much good.
Elsewhere in England, the Bank of England this week said, what the hell's
Said
wrong with you people?
Said we're all fucked.
Well, it's a bit more
Nuanced.
than that. He did complain, though. He had a complaint. Bank of England head said, what's wrong with you people? Why don't you just accept that you're going to be poor from here on out?
Except you're a poor remarks Sparks Backlash. Because the governor said this, yeah?
Yeah.
Just accept that you're poor, unlike me.
He was complaining that everyone wants a pay rise and strikes and cuts. And it's like, we can't afford this. We can't afford it. Yet you can afford to give a couple of billion to Ukraine.
Right.
You can afford to print billions during 2020 when basically you told everyone to stay at home.
You can afford to...
Three quarters of the year.
You can afford to give millions in no-bid contracts to friends of politicians for PPE,
Yeah,
personal
including
protective equipment for the COVID scam, but not to the ordinary people. Yeah. Speaking of that, here is the guy we all sensible people love to hate. You can just actually play both of those, Scotty. So there's one on the left and one on the right. Just play the left-hand one and just right-click the next one.
I think we have to get away from the blame game because so many of the things that you have mentioned were unknowns at the time.
And the next one.
So rather than have a blame game, and that's one of the things that we have to stay away from because there were things that happened and it was a moving target and there were things that you did not know at the time and you had to, out of necessity, make a decision.
Yeah.
And sometimes the decision was partially right.
Yeah,
he's lying.
So it's we have to get away from the blame game. Mistakes were made by people. And wrong decisions were made by people. But let's not get into the blame game because, and I don't know who those people were who made those decisions, who handed down policies. You know what I mean? Who told people to lock themselves in their houses and stay away from their grannies and stop kids going to schools and banned alternative remedies and all that kind of stuff and acted like a little tin pot dictator. I don't know who that person particularly was, but whoever it was, we should not engage in the blame game, right?
Right.
Just in the off chance that it might have been me that did any of that, we definitely should not do the blame game, right? Because I'm old and retired, so I'm out of it now. So just go away. But what they didn't know, actually, for example, well, here's something on the blame game. Check this out. This is just a Twitter grab, and it's from the Twitter files from when the Twitter files were around. An example of why there really should be a blame game being played. This is Twitter email, and we all know about the Twitter files at this point. Biden government, intel agencies, FBI, and all the rest, working with social media to censor accurate information on social media about many different things, but including Twitter, this one specifically, about COVID, the internal message from Twitter, probably instigated or encouraged by the FBI, sending a heads up that we will take action on Martin Kulldorff, a professor of Harvard Medical School, for violating our COVID-19 misinformation policy, specifically by sharing false information regarding the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccines, which goes against CDC guidelines, as specified by Anthony Fauci. And what did Martin Kulldorff say that egregiously violated these guidelines that required him to be censored on Twitter? He said no, in response to someone asking, do you think younger age groups or people who already had the virus need to be vaccinated? He said no. Thinking that everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older, high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor do children. Which was absolutely 100% true, logical, rational at the time, even Fauci. But still, it was censored effectively by Fauci, the FBI, the Biden government, and assorted intel agencies, and of course their shock troops on social media. In this case, people on Twitter, or people behind the scenes on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these aren't mistakes that were made. This was tyrannical, an imposition of a tyranny, a bureaucratic, medico-bureaucratic tyranny on the population that was done deliberately and in violation, in complete violation, let's say, or ignorance in the sense of ignoring evidence that was available that what they were saying with these guidelines and these tyrannical policies were not true, were not accurate, were not scientific.
It violated medical ethics 101.
Right.
On that, Bobby Kennedy has a plausible theory as to why they pushed so hard to get vaccines to everyone, down to kids, everyone, healthy, unhealthy, whatever. He says in his book, actually, I'm reading at the moment, The Real Anthony Fauci, it fits with how Fauci has done things like this in the past. Mm-hmm. He didn't want a control group. The last thing they wanted was what we were starting to do in late 21 and going into 22, was to start to compare, okay, how are the stats going in the vaccinated and the unvaccinated?
Right.
They wanted to obliterate that signal by getting everyone down to 2-day-old infants, all of them. And then there'll be then at the end, because they knew that there were injuries coming in at this point and deaths. And so they were like, let's get this now, because later on it'll be like, we don't know. We'll just put
Let's
this.
not play the blame
we'll put
game.
unknown cause of death in this tech. Yeah. Who can tell? They're all vaccinated.
But lest anybody think that I'm anti-vax or anti-COVID or I don't believe in the COVID narrative, I just want to put out this reminder just before we continue that, this is from the British government actually. It's on the British government website. Just in case you haven't got one yet, people, you still have time to get a first and second dose of the COVID vaccine, because the offer is ending. There's a one-time offer and it's ending for most people on the 30th of June this year. So you've got less than 2 months.
Good.
To get out there. So Neil, you, me, and anybody you know, please get them out, because
COVID. No, I don't.
Obviously,
I got 7.
No, but you should start again.
No,
because at a certain point, as you know, it probably runs out. It's not effective anymore, so it's kind of like starting again. So if we can all get out and everybody go out there and get your COVID vaccine, because everybody knows COVID is rampaging through the community at this point, and through care homes and through hospitals and through nurseries and schools and stuff. So it's a deadly, deadly virus, and it's asymptomatic. You won't have any symptoms before you actually die from it. So go out and get as many vaccines as possible right now for free. And you get a burger and fries with them as well.
That actually happened.
Yep.
The last bit is true. Here's someone else speaking then and now. Look at this side by side.
Jesus. Yeah.
Trudeau.
Misinformation and disinformation is carrying people to believe things that are untrue. And vaccinations is a perfect example of it.
Any vaccine we distribute to Canadians will be safe for Canadians.
Are people who've probably gotten very sick from vaccinations.
that every vaccine that is approved is safe for Canadians is uncompromising.
Well, individuals are allowed to make their own choices. There may be all sorts of different reasons why someone is hesitant to get vaccinated. There's no more excuses to not get your shot. And therefore, while not forcing anyone to get vaccinated, enforcement measures in place will make sure that everyone is vaccinated. I chose to make sure that all the incentives, travelers across the country need to be fully vaccinated. People coming into the country need to be fully vaccinated. We're there. Don't get to work in the public service. Don't get to go to movie theaters or gyms or restaurants. To encourage Canadians to get vaccinated. And that's exactly what they did. We got vaccinated to a higher level than just about any other of our peer countries.
Unknown causes was the leading cause of death in Alberta last year.
If those people are so fucking stupid, if he's such a fucking idiot, he needs to go. You know, if he got it so wrong, he needs to go. You know?
He's not going
Okay.
anywhere. Yeah.
Him and all the rest of them, who all said the same thing in Western countries, and now are either, maybe they're not, some of them aren't as stupid as him to expose himself in that way as, you know, lying basically about what he said and didn't say. But if they're so ignorant and so stupid, they need to go. They're irresponsible. They're not competent for governments. They need to leave, right? But then they would say, well, we were just following the science. Okay, well then give the scientists. Pull Fauci out. Who does the buck stop with here? Pull him out. And let's put him in prison, you know?
Instead, what's actually happening is politicians are being fired. Going back to the UK this week, Andrew Bridgen was a Conservative MP. He spoke out mostly late last year against the vaccination campaigns. He basically called for it just to be paused, that's all, especially as it was being lowered and pushed down to an ever lower age in children. He was alerting Parliament with speeches about the evidence that it was indeed causing vaccine harm. He was first suspended from the Conservative Party, and last week he was fired. Think about it now. He's an actual MP. He won in an election. So, and he was just summarily dismissed. First
from the party.
From the party. First, yeah, he was sent to the backbench, now from the party. So that's someone who is elected to represent you. He cannot represent you.
Be a member of the party anymore.
Well, no, he's lost his seat.
Yeah, they can't. I don't think they can't. They haven't removed him from his seat. I think they removed him from the party, but he can't be kicked out of. He can't be denied his seat until the next election. You know what I mean?
I thought
he was
he
kicked
lost
out. No, but it's just as bad. I mean, it's saying that someone like him saying, "Listen, the COVID policies and vaccination policies were wrong. There are a lot of people who have been injured. The people were manipulated and forced and coerced in different ways, threatened to get a vaccine that they didn't necessarily need. And as a result of it, many of them are now injured as a result, and that someone needs to be held to account." And for saying that, he was told basically that your views do not align with the Conservative Party, the ruling party in the UK, and therefore you're kicked out.
Okay, thank you for checking that on me. I must have leapt to my imagination was going wild there. I thought, Jesus Christ, they just.
But in a certain sense, it's a means
MP.
to that end. That in the next general election, they're hoping that he won't get the votes from the people because he's seen as persona non grata. They're hoping that people are stupid enough, Conservative voters in the UK are stupid enough to think that if he's no longer a member of the Conservative Party, as ordained by or as deemed by the Conservative Party leadership, then we shouldn't vote for him either. Right. We shouldn't vote him back in next election. Anyway, did you see? There was a great. I'll just put this up. It gets us on the Russia topic, but this was congressional hearing. Did I just send it to you, Scotty? Congressional inquiry, hearing, whatever, on Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine. Talking to generals, American generals, about what the deal is. Are we giving them enough weapons? Are they going to win bigly? Are they going to beat Russia bigly? Is Zelensky awesome? And how's it going? There's a great little piece in it. I can't remember the guy's name, but he looks like the skull out of that superhero. You know, the guy that they. Anyway, have a listen.
Military assessment is the equipment that the U.S. and our partners providing enough to pave the way for a decisive victory against the Russians by Ukraine.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the notes on your recent trip to Kiev as well. They were very helpful to me. So we went into a planning process with our Ukrainian colleagues last winter, and we developed with them a number of courses of action, wargamed them carefully. And when we came down to the key courses of action for an offensive, we calculated the amount of equipment and the various types that they required, and we have fulfilled that. We have nearly gotten everything into Ukraine, and I am confident they have what they need for the offensive that we have planned with them. And I can go into significant detail in a closed session with you, sir.
Okay, we'll pick it up then. Thank you. Thank you, General.
To it, sir. Thank you.
You've just testified in response to Senator Kelly that your belief is that they have what they need to be successful in the counteroffensive this spring in the South and in the East. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Our mantra is that we never want to see a fair fight. Do they have what they need to have an unfair advantage in this offensive going forward?
Sir, they have to be better than the Russian force they face. And there are great weaknesses in the Russian force they face right now. Those weaknesses are temporary, and the Russians will improve their posture and their capabilities over time. But time and the enemies, the Ukrainians' enemies' capabilities is an important factor in this. And
don't they need more?
I believe that they will have what they need.
He's like, so here's the thing. Blumenthal's like, so here's the thing. America doesn't like a fair fight, right? We never. I mean, historically, we don't gauge a fair fights, right? We only beat up on the small guy, right?
Turkey shoots.
Yeah, we like turkey shoots. We like to beat up on the small guy because that's what great powers do, right? That's how you show your greatness, by beating up on the little guy, you know, and structuring it so that we always win, you know, and then we declare that they were a really tough enemy, but actually we just beat the crap out of them because they were a small country. We sanctioned them like for years beforehand until their country was kind of like economically destroyed, and then we bombed the shit out of them like a turkey shoot.
With no air defense.
With no air defense, and that's how we like it, you know, general. So anyway, moving on from that, in terms of Ukraine, that's what we want to see in Ukraine right now. Is that what's going to happen again? Can you just tell me, is that what's going to happen? Are we going to win big league again? Like, yeah, we're going to smack the Russians and it'll be yay America? And is that going to happen? And the guy's like, well, let me explain to you, Senator. You know, in a war, like for one side to win, it has to be better than the other side, right?
Right.
And the guy's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I got that, yeah. This is like PhD level war gaming, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
So, and he's like, right now, the enemy
is weak.
Of Ukraine, that. He didn't say Russia. The enemy of Ukraine is weak, but that's only right now.
Forgot to add that in.
Yeah,
he was saying the enemy.
The enemy, yeah, but it's only right now. That's going to change. So in a little while, they're going to be stronger, and as I just told you, the stronger side will win in a war. So kind of what I'm saying is that we're giving them weapons as much as possible right now to hope that they'll win, but it looks like in the near future Russia's going to beat Ukraine. Does that answer your question? Yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks. Okay, let's move on.
Last week we heard General Petraeus reiterate a version of this, and I was flabbergasted. So I asked you, I mean, does he really believe what he's saying, that the Ukraine is going to beat Russia? We wondered about that. How is he just projecting an aura of calm because he knows the checks are coming in? Mm-hmm. It helps the grease flow in Washington, D.C. Well, this is a bit more clear cut. This is like a general who's been asked specifically about the material they need. Yep, we've given them everything. We're ready. We're going to beat them. Yeah. They really sound like they think they're going to win.
Well, they have to say that. It's to keep the whole thing going. They have to appear to win in the end, and they're desperately at this point trying to structure it in such a way that it looks like they didn't lose. That because, like they said, there's several of them have said that if Russia isn't defeated, we're all screwed. And their calculation of the whole thing, in their complex geopolitical energy, propaganda, optics, all that kind of stuff, if Russia isn't soundly defeated or isn't seen to be defeated, in this conflict, then the West is screwed. So we have to keep up the appearance. So let's at the very least, let's keep up the appearance that Ukraine is winning, and is going to win. Anytime now it's going to win. Anytime now there's going to be a big offensive. Anytime now that big offensive is going to really take back Crimea and Donbass and turn Russia into like a federation of non-aligned states, whatever. And
the Republic of Tatarstan.
Right, we got to keep that talk up basically, while behind the scenes things go in exactly the opposite direction.
Okay, and that's probably your final word on it. But it occurred to me watching that a second time that what did he mean by an unfair fight? Might there be a surprise here that there?
He was talking historically. We don't like to see it.
Yeah.
We don't like to be. We like to be. What did he say? Yeah, we always like to have an unfair fight. I.e., we always like to make sure.
Well, what he meant by that was what gives us the advantage here. Yeah. Well, they don't have any.
Well, he's talking historically how America America never loses, right? Even if they do technically, let's say, lose or it goes wrong, they can never be seen to lose. Like, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, it's always really bad, and we don't want to see a situation where it leaks out, or there's a general perception around the world, or it's very clear for most people around the world that America lost. You know what I mean? And that's why we're not even mentioning Russia here in a certain sense. We're just saying Ukraine's enemy, and that the one, this country that Ukraine is fighting, right? Not us, right? Because if it ever became, we don't want to talk about America fighting Russia, because if it doesn't go well and Russia wins, then Russia will be seen to have defeated America, which is like the fucking end of it's the end of the country. They're all going to commit suicide. They're all going to commit harikiri. So it's bizarre. I mean, it's an example of just how much the Americans have forever lived on and off perception, propaganda, the image, the optics. How they've convinced, the exercise of American power around the world and the implementation of American power around the world has been at least 50% through reputation. And that reputation is sacrosanct and it cannot be tarnished in any way, in any serious way. Yeah.
Well, the Ukis in the last 2 days have been shelling the Bryansk region again. This last incident early this morning killed 2 people. They also hit an oil terminal with some kind of drone in Sevastopol. But how do you compare that to the Russian Ministry of Defense saying they destroyed a command center in Carlson with the launch of like a dozen sea-based cruise missiles? Like shelling a little township versus that kind of firepower, it's still a no contest, There's
an update on the Nord Stream 1 and 2, who did it. I know you're still in doubt about who blew up the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, right? You're still on the fence about it.
Wasn't the Greek anarchists aligned with Kiev?
Well, is that in English? Yeah. The translation of Danish information, Danish website, and it quotes the Danish Defense Command saying that Russian ship, as you can see, that the Russian special vessel SS-750, which had a mini submarine on board, was photographed near the place where the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged. The Danish Defense Command confirmed. So there you go. You get it first here, folks. Second here. That's obviously first on that website. Second here, we're letting you know that ship right there blew up the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines.
The ship that lays the pipe blew it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
It was a mistake. They just accidentally blew it up instead of fixing it. And then there's this.
Those British depleted uranium shells are being used, by the way.
Yeah.
They're already in Ukraine. Scumbags.
Thanks.
Medvedev has gone full Russian bear on Ukraine. It's funny how he's off the leash since it started. He's now calling for the complete... This is ex-Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. He's calling for the complete dismantling of the Kiev regime, as well as for inflicting mass destruction on the country's military personnel and hardware.
Isn't that what they've been trying to do?
Well, I don't know. Have they not been doing it with one hand tied behind the back kind of thing?
Maybe. It depends. When the time is right, I suppose you might have the opportunity to do that. have to attrite them first. That's what all war is about. It's not about territory gained. It's about whether or not you can destroy the enemy's military capability enough that it's basically game over, and then you can have as much territory as you want. I came across this, and I thought it was a joke. It's a website called Zelp, and they make that. They're making that for cows. Zero Emissions Livestock Project develops cattle wearable technology to neutralize methane that they breathe out. I think they have one for their arses as well, but they're not showing it here. But anyway, it's for cows breathing, and they put on this like mask, so they breathe out mostly through their nose, and it goes through and it extracts the methane from cows breathing, and that's going to save the planet. And it's real. And I just thought I'd share that with
face masks for cows.
I saw it, so you do too. You have to too. You have to as well. Because I can't just, you
can't just suffer it alone.
I can't suffer it alone. And in other good news, related good news, although the title wouldn't necessarily lead you to believe that, related good news, but I think it's good news because there's an ominous heating event is unfolding in the oceans. Average sea surface temperatures have soared to record highs and stayed there. It's a worrying signal of an ocean in crisis. First paragraph is, to call what's happening in the oceans right now an anomaly is a bit of an understatement. Since March, average sea surface temperatures have been climbing to record highs, as shown in the dark line in the graph above. For me, that's good news because it means the ocean, when I go to the beach this summer, it's going to be warmer. Awesome. But I will...
Of course, what they tell you is that's why they need to gag the cows.
Exactly. Yeah. So as I'm driving past all those masked cows on my way to the overheated ocean, well, it balances out, no? You can enjoy the overheated ocean as long as your cows are masked.
You're not driving to the beach.
No, I'm flying in a private jet.
No, you can cycle.
Yeah.
Maybe that might have something to do with the 19,000 undersea volcanoes they discovered last week.
Right. Undersea volcanoes. Are they human-made undersea volcanoes?
Shh, we don't talk about that.
Human activity did those.
We don't talk about that. Same with overland. I mean, they just... I was going to say it's the elephant in the room, but it's not. It's the volcano in the room. I mean, obviously, if there is excess of heat or gas or anything, the first go-to place is what's going on with volcanoes.
Yeah.
And or the seismic activity.
No, it's what's going on with cows. Cows farting and you driving your car too much. That's what causes a volcano to erupt, Neil. Fuck's sakes, get with the program, will you?
Have you ever seen him try to square that?
Shut up. I don't want to talk about it, okay? The science is settled.
We've talked in the past about the extent to which the US dollar is used still around the world. Till recently, I thought it was still 90%, despite the kind of talk of stuff. It's now at 58%. Down from 73% 20 years ago. So it was never that high. Maybe 90% in some key trades like oil and energy.
Yeah. It depends
and
on
falling
what's
fast.
used for.
This is from
it's a petrodollar.
some analyst.
That's important. The most important.
Okay.
That's what everybody needs, You can always be sure, as long as petrodollar exists, that they're always going to be using it for, everybody needs that, right? All the commodities can ebb or flow, whatever, some of them anyway. But, yeah, at a certain point, when it gets below a certain point, it'll be time for the CBDCs.
For the what?
CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency.
Not to be confused with the hemp oil.
No.
Okay.
Not CBD. On this article, it's from a month ago, and it even goes back older. This was known, but just in case anybody didn't know it, about them sanctions, them Russian sanctions.
Right.
North Africa diesel exports to Europe surge as Russia digs deeper into Ukraine. Title doesn't tell you very much, but read down and you realise that in March this year, Morocco imported the most Russian diesel of the North African countries, shipping 180,000 barrels per day. March has seen North African countries import 250,007 barrels per day of diesel from Russia, the highest amount since the beginning of the Ukraine war. And then the very next paragraph. At the same time, North Africa has also seen its fuel exports, especially to Europe, rise since Russian President Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale evil invasion of Ukraine. So put those two things together and them's your sanctions. It's like, we're not buying any more Russian oil because Russia's evil and we're just going to have to work it out. And then quietly, Morocco, buy a bunch of Russian oil and sell it to us at a higher price, okay? But don't fucking tell anybody.
That's
one small example of
That's
what's been going on.
Do you know what the main route is? Scotty's going to put it up here. This is also a headline this week. Guess who's become the world's largest exporter of oil to Europe?
Micronesia.
India.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which has no oil.
Mm-hmm.
Russian oil, this is Bloomberg, Russian oil still powering Europe's cars with help of India.
At least they're open about it. Russian oil still powering. I mean,
right.
You know, again, it's like just jaw dropping. You know, it's like we're hitting. You know, we're sanctioning Russia. We're not buying its oil and gas, but actually we are through a third country, which means we're buying it at a higher price, which means our energy costs are going up and they're being passed on to the consumer, and food costs are going up, et cetera, et cetera. So we're screwing over our people via these Europeans and Americans are screwing over their people via these Russian sanctions while not doing anything against Russia. Because Russia's, you know, maybe it's selling it slightly cheaper to India and Morocco and other countries who then resell it back to Europe, who won't buy Russian oil except if they buy it through a third country. But even so, because the West there is a shortfall and they're having to put more money into renewables, which aren't really, which aren't working very well. They're, you know, it depends on whether the wind blows, the sun shines, whatever, you know. So basically, Russia's selling more overall, even if it's a lower price, it's selling more because of the general sanctions climate type thing, you know, they're selling more to other countries. So they're not hitting Russia in any significant way at all. They're only screwing over their own populations.
Yeah.
And you think they don't know this?
Doubly, because India is paying for that crude oil from Russia in rupees.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
there's
de-dollarization.
ruble-rupee trade going on that bypasses the euro and the dollar.
Right. De-dollarization. Yeah, so it's just madness. Like that's what happens every week. You know, we come on here and it's just a litany of nonsense, madness, insanity. You know, and you know, extreme government corruption, increasingly extreme government corruption being exposed, and increasing amount of crickets from the population. You know what I mean? Increasing apathy or sad. You know, you'd think that as the evidence of corruption and idiocy and fecklessness and recklessness towards the population by government in Western countries, as that increases, you would think that people will get more and more vocal, more and more angry. You'd see
more and more French about it.
Yeah, more and more protests and stuff. But you see less. Well, or at least no difference, no change whatsoever, you know? And what do you do?
What do you want? Pitchforks and torches?
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe they're all quietly...
just waiting. They're sharpening their pitchforks.
Where's your pitchforks?
It's out the back somewhere. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I can handle for this week. In terms of, that's just the, you know, I mean, we'd like to be able to tell you.
Well, small detail.
Yeah.
The U.S. government was named last week in a formal report as the coordinator of an international child trafficking network. Anyway, moving on, here's Tom with the weather.
Yeah.
Same thing, kind of like it was a bombshell thing on Fox News because they had a whistleblower at Congress saying, yeah, so I worked in, you know, HHS, the Human Health Services Department, and I was at the border thinking I was doing one thing and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
There's an organized Biden administration or government, US government operation to traffic children. From
to sponsors who can be like the Mexican cartel gangs who then, you know, sell them as sex slaves or as child labor. Child labor was the main thing. She said, we're talking 19th century level of child labor is going on in the United States now.
And they're using immigrants.
Yeah.
And this is what the the Democrats and the left are supporting. The bleeding heart, like, let the immigrants in. That's what they're actually supporting. I mean, it's obviously not black and white, but
that's been building for years.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I wonder if this is related. The Biden administration has given the green light to, in principle, he hasn't done it yet, but in principle, U.S. troops can now be deployed to the border, ostensibly to thwart drug trafficking. But I think they're heading for a mess at the border, and the fact that they so adamantly did everything opposite to what Trump wanted is they're going to end up doing what he wanted, but worse, or too late, or something. That I don't even know. I don't. They're so caught up in who's saying it, a Democrat or a Republican. You know, it's kind of like abortion in the United States. It depends on who's saying it. What no one can really think clearly about it. And in the meantime, there's an actual problem where hundreds of thousands of kids just disappear into the U.S.
It's bizarre to me that the kind of tyranny that we're seeing, or the kind of, you know, seriously negative social and cultural shifts and changes that are happening in Western society, and particularly in America, but in Western Europe as well. It's bizarre to me that that's all happening under a leftist agenda, you know? Because
you go on.
It's because, I mean, you know, Jonathan Haidt and his care, his moral taste buds, and that different people have different different natures, effectively, where they're focused more on different kind of values. Let's say, you know, the leftist value would be primarily have a care foundation, which is care and compassion and consideration for others, right? And a lot of this stuff is happening in America that we're critical of, and a lot of people are critical of. It's happening and being supported by the population on the basis of it being about caring for others. But it's going in a very tyrannical direction, because it's like people are being censored, shut down. It has all the hallmarks of a tyranny, of a kind of fascism, or totalitarianism, but on the basis of we're doing this because we care. And it ostensibly is about, you know, it's compassion for all the minorities and the oppressed groups and that kind of stuff. You know, let's say transgenders and Black Lives Matter and, you know, LGBT and blah, blah, blah. And it's going in that direction on that basis, you know, because I always thought that that kind of tyranny and totalitarianism would always have come from the more right-wing foundations, you know, of kind of loyalty, in-group loyalty and justice and that kind of thing, you know. But it's bizarre that for me, it's bizarre that it's happening from the opposite side, you know. And it's even worse because we have Nazi Germany as a kind of right wing, and it was probably defined by, you know, it was, you know, the excesses of Nazi Germany and what they're held up today as the thing never to do again were based on kind of in-group loyalty and you know. Persecute the Jews, persecute minorities, persecute others, because they're not con-specific. They're not like us, right? So, and that's what we should never do again. You know, so it was always tyranny on that basis of the historical precedent was that it was a right-wing thing. Now it's a left-wing thing, and the same kind of thing is happening from the left, and it's bizarre to me that you could do the same thing on the basis of compassion. I can understand how you could do it on the basis of get the foreigners out, get those not part of our in-group out, persecute them, they're the problem. I can understand how you could go in that direction. They did in Nazi Germany on that basis, but not on the lefty compassion basis, you know.
Yeah, but the compassion doesn't translate into actual objective.
For the average person,
results.
it is, though. The manipulation is where people get hooked into it is on the basis of that compassion, right? All the people who are supporting, you know, reassignment surgery, you know, like basically butchering young children and stuff, having their genitals and removed and stuff, is based on
compassion.
But
how? What are the actual outcomes for the people you're being compassionate for?
But they don't look that far.
Suicide rate doubles.
But they don't look at the details. That's the problem.
What about Granny during lockdown? Remember, Save Granny. More grannies died that spring than they would ordinarily have if we hadn't done anything.
Yeah. Right. And the worst thing is that because you have that history,
AOC goes to the border, child exploitation goes to the roof.
Right. Exactly. But that's why, because people aren't looking at the details. They're not being skeptical enough. They're not critically thinking enough. They're not looking into it. They're just going with their base compassion, care, if it even smells a bit of any kind of discrimination against a minority, it's bad. Stop that from happening and let them do what they want. Support the thing. And the problem is that if you try and push back against it now, that historical precedent of Nazi Germany, which is very much in news today, right? You get called a Nazi for pushing it back against the modern, the reinvented leftist Nazism. You get called a 1930s Nazi. Do you know what I mean? It's like a setup. You know what I mean? It's like you're caught in a bind. You know what I mean? You've been bound. It has somehow been set up where you are caught, and you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
You've just explained. You answered your own question. Why don't people rise up to all the shit that's coming down?
Because
it's a minefield.
Yeah.
Psychologically and legally. And there are a few people who are brave enough to speak up in spite of it all.
Yeah. Have to thread that needle type thing, Very difficult. Anyway, So, we'd like to have brought you some shiny, happy bunny rabbits and rainbows news, but, the best we can do is try and keep it light and see the funny side of it, if such a thing exists. So I think we'll leave it there for this week, unless you've got something else, Neil, do you? No? Yeah. So we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for commenting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back next week with another show. So until then, have a good week. See ya.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.